So welcome everybody. In the top left of the screen is the author of one of my most beloved games. It's not only because we talk to each other, but it's really true, and it was beloved before I know that I once I meet him, and it's Matthew Dunstan. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, Alish. How are you?
Yeah, I am fine. In fact, you can speak Czech. A little bit.
Já mluvím malý česky, ale jsem moc pomalu s českým. Neumím moc slovy, ale jo.
So I won't torture you with that you have to speak in Czech.
Torture your listeners. I think I would be the one torturing your listeners.
No, I will be torturing you with my English. So in advance, I'm sorry for my poor English. I cannot use these words like the and a appropriately and
right.
tenses and so on. Hope you can stand it. So the game I was talking about is Elysium. And I really love it. I will tell why I love it. But before that, let's try to introduce you. You have really, when I was preparing for this interview, which I am not doing very often, preparation for interview, but for this one I really prepared. I read your introduction on Board Game Geek, and it's really nice. In fact, it's some kind of story, you know. So can you? Where are you from? How small is your town where you was living? And just give us brief introduction.
Sure. It makes me realize I probably should update what I have on Board Game Geek. But anyway, I'm Australian. I was born in Sydney, which is one of the largest cities in Australia. But I grew up in a small town called Muswellbrook, which was about 12,000 people. About 5 hours from Sydney, which in I know in the Czech Republic 5 hours probably you can cross from one side of the country to the other, but in Australia that doesn't get you too far. So I grew up in just a small country town, playing sort of traditional games. I guess my aunt taught me chess when I was young, and I played cards and things. But then a friend got Settlers of Catan when I was 12 or 13 or something, and played a few games, and I guess I've always been a bit of a gamer, but I didn't really start designing until later. And I was in Australia, but then I eventually moved to the UK to do a PhD in Cambridge, and that was about 10 years ago now. And now I still work in Cambridge, but I also live half of the time in the Czech Republic in Prague with my partners. So it's a complicated story. And
in fact, you are working at the university as a chemistry materials engineer. This is one part of your Jekyll and Hyde personality. And what is the second part of this person?
Well, I'm a game designer, I guess. I don't know whether that's the Hyde or the Jekyll part, which one looks better, but that's So I'm designing games probably now for 10 or 12 years, I guess. I've had about 25 games probably released, something like that. And
you have 39 titles on the Board Game Geek.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. You did prepare. Well done. Some of those are cheats, of course, because they're sort of like one expansion for something or other. But it's I have had a lot of doing it, and I work a lot with other people doing that. So Elysium, for example, is a co-design with Brett Gilbert, another designer from Cambridge, and we've worked together on a lot of games. And I tend to work with other people on my games generally.
And in fact, in Czech, you also work, and the time you spend in Czech, you work only on the games, or you have something else to work there?
No. I work when I'm in Prague. I work still in my job in Cambridge, but I just work remotely. So a lot of my work is theoretical chemistry, so I can just do it on a computer, which right now is not so different, I guess, to how we all have to work. I do both jobs, both the research and the games, kind of all the time, no matter where I am. And you know, as long as I have a computer and internet, then I can do both to a certain extent.
And am I right that the reason why I'm working still in chemistry materials, that you are developing new materials for board games, yeah, for your components and so.
Well, it's interesting. So there are some very not really for board games, but I have definitely thought of some components for things like escape rooms. There are some really interesting
I see.
Materials that I always have wanted to put into, and I actually I have made educational escape rooms actually for so last year it was the International Year of the Periodic Table. I'm not sure what it is in Czech, but
it's periodic table, periodická tabulka.
Excellent. I know some more Czech now. Excellent, perfect. Yeah, I designed with some other scientists kind of a pop-up escape room that you do in a tent that we had children do to sort of discover things about the periodic table and what real objects are made of, what are the elements in them. So sometimes I cross over my two things together. I've made a board game for a synchrotron that's in the UK. So it's a particle accelerator, and it's a game to help people understand what you do at a synchrotron and what it's like to be a scientist with a bit of humor and things like that. So yeah, it's sort of a mixture. And what I was saying about the materials is so I'm not sure. There are things called shape memory alloys, and these are metals which, for example, you could make a paperclip out of one of these, and you could completely deform the paperclip, so like thing and make it like one thin bit of metal. And if you then put it in boiling water, it will spontaneously reform the paperclip shape without you touching it. So you can have these. You could make these messages that, you know, like almost like invisible writing that would appear like little bits of metal, and when you put hot water, they'd sort of reform the words and things, which I think would be really cool. So, but in reality, I work on batteries and carbon capture things in chemistry.
When I go back to Board Game Geek description and to Australia, you wrote there that in fact, if I understand it well, that this desire about the board games was also the motivation to go into the world. So in fact, did you become designer before you moved to UK, or it was afterward?
I didn't have any games published, but I did start designing games just before I moved, about 6 months before I left Australia. But I didn't. I mean,
it's not interconnected.
Not really. Although that being said, I think my approach to how I design games is like I am one person, and I probably have a similar approach to both my work in science and my work in games. I think there are a lot of parallels between the two. I sometimes think of it like an experiment. You know, when you're trying to discover, like in the world in science, all we're trying to work out are like there are systems, and we're just trying to understand them or observe them. And I think in games there are lots of systems out there that a game could have or that could feature in a game. And I sometimes think as a designer, it's our job is it's not to invent them, it's just either to discover them or to observe them or to understand them and understand how we can use them to be enjoyable or to make a game. So you think about doing experiments to sort of test, you know, do you understand the system? Do you know how to use it in a game? So I mean, I don't sit down and sort of, you know, formally go like, oh, this is an experiment, set my apparatus or something. I mean, it's but when I think about it, I think there are there's an approach that's common to both, maybe, or the way you think. Yeah.
So let me introduce you from how I view you, you know, and to people who are watching our discussion. In fact, even the Czechs would be surprised that they know you through your work a lot, you know. Okay, so there is Elysium, which I think is not so well known in Czech Republic, but still.
I don't think it was translated into Czech, was it? I don't think.
No, it wasn't. No. It wasn't. But Relic Runners was published in English. It was possible to buy it in Czech. But people know Professor Evil and the Citadel of Time, which was in Czech Citadela času. Professor Evil and Citadela času. I don't know the name, but I think it was
Blackfire, I think it was.
Yeah, Blackfire. Yeah. And also the Costa Rica was published by Albi. And I think also the Snowdonia is quite known between the Eurogamers in Czech. It wasn't published. So there
I should also say that I'm not the I'm not the main designer of Snowdonia. That's Tony Boydell. Just I don't want him to think I'm stealing his thunder. I just made a few expansions for it, but yeah.
But still, you participated.
Yes.
But for me, you know, when I check your portfolio, for example, there is also these new Cosmos adventure games. It's more or less like, if I understand the mechanic of these games well, these games are like on the border between story games and exit games or something like this, because Cosmos use it as a continuation of their exit games in some sense.
Yeah, it's something like that for us. Actually, I mean, I made the game with Phil Walker Harding of like Sushi Go fame, if you know Sushi Go.
Yeah.
We didn't make them for Cosmos. We sort of made them ourselves and then ended up selling them to Cosmos. But for us, they're inspired by point and click adventure video games. So sort of like Curse of Monkey Island, even like Myst or Ribbon, these kind of games. So it's much more about definitely story is probably more important than you'd see in the escape rooms, like than in Exit. There's much more of a sense of a realistic world that you're trying to think about. How do I interact with things? How do I use this item with this other item, or this item? If I see a door, can I find a key to use it? You know, it's a little bit more like logical thinking than escape room kind of thing, and more of a story.
Is it better to burn dog or cat to open these doors? Yeah.
Well, yeah. We're trying not to have too many, you know, completely illogical. But I think it was sort of funny. The earlier prototypes of that had those, like, part of it is that ridiculous kind of those things where you make some combination and it gives you something completely. It's those moments of sort of surprise and humor that we also like. I think people who play those games appreciated it as well. Yeah. That there was, you know, as long as it's not too frustrating, but yeah, you have the possibility to kind of like surprise the player, but in a kind of fun way. I think sometimes in escape rooms, it's hard to do that in a fun way because players feel a bit frustrated or there's a lot of pressure, and, you know, but in these, it's all a little bit more relaxed. It's a little bit more fun, I hope, you know, or at least that's how we were looking at it. So they, I think will come to Czech soon, I hope. They're in English now, and we're just working on the fourth one now, actually. So
yeah, I hope it will be published soon by, I think, Albi in Czech, or, you know, I don't remember.
Dino did the exit rooms. Yeah.
So,
anyway,
so you didn't implement this famous pixel hunting in these games?
No. That's well. Unlock done a pretty good job of having pixel hunting though, like with their hidden, I'm not sure if you played Unlock with their hidden numbers on the cards. You know, that's like as close to something like pixel hunting you'd get. But I'd say maybe that'll be a promo. You know, you'll get a card and you'll just have to like search every little thing of it or something.
But what I want to point out in your board game graphic is that it's really impressive how various games you design. This is not very common, I think. And sometimes people design, let's say, one or two type of games, especially Eurogamers and German style designers. They always design these Euro style games. Yeah. But you was working on Elysium, which is card strategy game. Then you have here the Fairy Tale, which is in fact abstract game, lightweighted but abstract game in some sense. Yeah. Then you work on Monumental, which, okay, if we put aside these miniatures, it's again some sort of deck building and again strategy game, more or less little bit of area control. Professor Evil is cooperative game. It's more for families and children's. Relic Runners, it's really nice family game. I really love the game. But still this Days of Wonders family style, you know. It's some strategy, light-weighted rules, but a lot of things you can do. Very nice production. So if I go, okay, so Snowdonia isn't yours. You steal it, but still it's pretty heavy euro.
Yeah.
And Costa Rica again, it's in fact Costa Rica is purely abstract game with a little bit of randomness and uncovering the tiles, like what would I say, like Carcassonne. Yeah. Push your luck game. Yeah, but still it's more or less you need to, if you really want to be good in this game, there is push your luck, but still you have to count, you have to memorize and so on. So am I right in this? And how you? It's a hard question, but how you see what you've done? How you personally see what you've done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely have different. Yeah, I mean, I make a sort of a wide variety of games. I think for me, something that I do think about this sometimes is that I really don't want to make another game that's similar to something I've already made as much as possible. And I wonder if that has something influence of why it's such a variety. I think, you know, as you mentioned, some designers, you know, they find a style of game and then they will keep iterating on it. Or, you know, I think of people like Uwe Rosenberg, who makes, you know, like Cottage Garden and like the sort of the polyomino thing, or, you know, and then he'll release mini games in that kind of genre or field. And I think for me, I always want to do something new. I want to discover some new system. And for me, it doesn't matter whether that's in a small, light, abstract game or family game, or whether that's in a very strategic sort of more complicated or longer style game. I think for me, I like the mechanism, the system, and sometimes that system is very simple, sometimes it's more complicated. But for me, it's about finding that. And so I don't limit myself to, I want to make, you know, games. So I think I want to make sure I make the game for an audience, and I know who that audience might be, but it doesn't have to be the same audience all the time. I think personally, I actually, I mean, I sort of grew up probably playing a lot of Magic when I was younger, and I think that's probably one of the bigger influences on that. And it's the style of game, like Elysium and Monumental, really, I think that I enjoy the most, certainly to play as a player. And I think going forward, I would love to. I'm working on a new kind of strategic card game and sort of slowly trying to get that together. But they always take a bit more time, and you know, I always have all these ideas, and I just, you know, want to keep making new things. So I just sort of spread myself around and do whatever I want, I guess. And yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers the question, but sort of meandering answer. But
I think it's perfect question. In fact, I am wondering if this approach is because you are experimenting in your work. So I think because I'm the mathematician, you know. So, and I think if you work in such as a scientist, it also deforms you in some way how you are working with the other things. You always trying to experiment, and what we are, I think your approach probably comes from that. Am I right or not?
Yeah, I think
that you are not happy if it's always the same. That you every day for 10 years you will be repeating again and again same experiment. It will be boring.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, and for me, it's the best part about designing is that moment where you find something new and it works. I don't think it's not the same kind of satisfaction when you make something that you knew would work already. There's something about discovering something new, and yeah, you're right. You have to try something new to have that feeling. So that's why you keep making games for different people. And I guess maybe the other slight little thing maybe in how I've grown up is that I got to go to like S, and I got to go actually very early on in my board game design career. You know, like I moved to Cambridge in 2011. I'd only just started that year, and I went to Essen that year. And I think probably having such an early stage where I saw so many different publishers and so many different styles of games, it probably meant that I didn't spend a lot of time, you know, like working on my first game by myself in a group that only plays one style of game. I think probably something about being, you know, seeing that variety also probably told me, oh, you can make games like this. Oh, there are people who want tiny little games. There are people who want, you know, like limitations and boundaries. I mean, like how science worked, you know, like rules and ideas, they need creativity. I mean, early on, there was that kind of craze about micro games, like Love Letter had come out, you know, and I made a game, Empire Engine, which was my second published game, and that was basically, it started life as an 18-card free print and play game. You know, very, very, very minimal. And actually, we went back and did more of those later, and you know, that's so completely different. What if you went from like Relic Runners being my first game, you know, this big sort of Days of Wonder, big box experience, beautiful components, family, to like 18, literally just 18 cards and a few cubes, you know, so that was like first and second game. I think, yeah, I'm inspired by seeing what's going out there. I want to kind of like follow up on it and see, and maybe there is something, again, like in science, I think while you don't want to repeat yourself, there's nothing wrong with looking out at what's going on and thinking, how do I iterate on that? How do I combine two things? I always think of myself as as an iterator. I'll see something in another game, and I won't want to copy it, but it'll say, oh, like maybe I could change this a little bit, or maybe I can do things. So I mean, Monumental is a good example of that, where, you know, I played a lot of deck building games, and I think for me, not the worst thing, but I played a lot of Ascension is one of the things, and Ascension is probably maybe the second most popular deck building game, I guess. Or there's a very good app. I play the app purely as kind of like a Zen thing now, because the card pool is so ridiculous that you can make infinite combos, and you can like it's. But I would just play it just as a, you know, like you play like another app with like, I don't know, if you had like threes or these kind of like 2048 game, you know, like you're just in a trance almost playing it, you know, you're not making. And I was like, well, that's a pity, because in Ascension, you just play all the cards in your hand. There's no choice. There's maybe a little bit, maybe you want to play them in a certain order, but there's not much choice. And I was like, well, it'd be just great if you could have not much more in terms of what the cards do, but why don't I have a bit of a choice about what I could do? And so that's where this idea of having an open hand and only be able to choose certain cards, you know, with a simple rule sort of came from. So yeah, that's the kind of how I think sometimes I'll approach new games, and that probably means that because I try to read lots of things from lots of different places, they sort of pop up in different styles of game.
Yeah. Just to tell people who don't know the basic mechanism of Monumental, it works like that you have the matrix of 3x3 cards, and in your turn you can play only one column and one row. Am I right?
Yeah. So
I don't have personally I don't have Monumental. I just watch how it works.
Yeah. Then once the cards you use are then discarded, and you'll deal new cards from your deck into the holes that are placed. So basically, every turn you're basically making a choice between, you know, use 5 of these 9 cards, and there's, you know, and from there, you know, things sort of proceed.
I'm always dancing around the Elysium, so let's come to this game, because
sure.
if Peter won't tell me that you are the author of Elysium, I would tell, okay, who is this Matthew Dunstan? I don't know him. He make nothing, you know.
In fact, at least you say that to my face. That's good, you know. Like some people just say that not to my face, and that's very rude. So.
Okay. In fact, I like the card games. I don't like the massive card games like, you know, like Mars or because it overwhelmed me. But I like these style of card game where you can play combos. You don't have a lot of cards in your hand, but you make the combos from, let's say, up to 15 cards or something like that. Okay, I love this game because of the variability. In fact, this have the similar style like Dominion on Whatever, because you have the decks. There are, I don't know, 7, 8 decks, and for every game you use only a few of these. I think like 3 or 4. And this is one thing I really like, the variability of the game. Second thing I really like on this game is that it has simple rules. The combinations come from the cards, and this is why I love the card games like Dominion or deck. In fact, I really like the deck building games. Like even though the Thunderstone is really poor in rules, this in some sense I think it's bad game. I really love it. And I have it 2 versions, and from time to time I play it just for fun. And Ascension is great, and so these games have simple rules, and all the rules are on the cards. And so in some sense, if you read the rules, you say, okay, it's small games, but in some sense, it's massive, because you have incredible amount of combination. But the reason why I really love this game is this system of paying for the cards. It's so original. I don't know any other game where you have, okay, to explain it to someone who don't know the game, every player has for its turn 4 columns. These columns have 4 colors. It's yellow, red, green, and blue, and every card costs some of these colors. And when you choose a card, you have to pay 1 column. But it's incredible twist. You can pay whatever column you want. You needn't to pay with the column of the price of the card. Am I right? I'm not saying
yes,
wrong?
That's right. Yes, no, you're right.
It would be bad if I will be wrong.
You've been playing it wrong all these times.
So if you pay for the card which has the symbol of red column, you can pay it with blue, red, green, or yellow. And such simple twist, it's so great. I found it so original, and this is why I really like this game. And the last thing is that everything is fit together. The game use only cardboard, no fancy things. It's look really nice. It has great illustrations. I like almost everything on this game. So you make this game together with Brett J. Gilbert, and in fact you made a lot of games with him. For example, Chocolate Factory from the last year. So my question, this wasn't a question, this was my talk about this game. but the question is, how is this game to you? What is your feeling about this game, and how what is the cooperation with Brett?
Yeah, well, it's a very special game to me. Probably it's certainly the best known of my designs, and it's and I think it's the closest to the style. I think our preferences are similar in terms of the kind of games that I really, if I had to say, is my absolute joy are these kind of card games where the variety comes from. Yeah, that you have a simple rule set, and it's how do things combine together to give you this. But I don't want to say it's not the mathematical sense of emergence, but it's this idea when you think of complex systems, complex like the weather, they have simple rules, but with different elements, you get these very complex behavior and a lot of variety in how a game plays out. But again, that is contained. So yeah, I think it probably is my favorite game to play of the games I've designed. Of course, it's hard. You have to choose which of your children you like best, kind of thing. But and I think the other point, really, and it leads to the collaboration with Brett, is that it wouldn't have been as good if I had just made it myself. Because there's something. Brett is a designer who actually generally prefers much simpler games. Simpler maybe isn't, but he likes games with even fewer rules. His first game was published by Asmodee, and it was called Divinare, and I'd recommend your listeners to go out and check it. It's a very, very lean kind of bluffing deduction game. You'd think it's a Reiner Knizia game, actually. I think if you didn't know who the author was. So he brings that kind of, I think, that really strict minimalism in terms of rules and concepts, And I think I have a sense that I want all these combinations, I want all these cards, and in the middle I think you have that beautiful variety that I like, but also a very clean rule set. And I think that pillar thing is somehow really a combination of our two influences, I guess. And I mean, you can never really like pinpoint exactly like who contributed what. It's all sort of this melting pot of ideas. But the game certainly could only have been made me working with him. If I'd made it myself, it wouldn't have had that kind of, you know, simplicity, I guess, or the cleanness of how things kind of fit together. I mean, interesting enough, it wasn't always as clean as that. When we actually submitted it, originally you had, instead of columns, you had dice, which were 4 colors, and you would roll them at the start of your turn, and then you would use them. But it meant that you had to either match colors or symbols. So it was a little bit more random or chaotic. Not really chaotic, but there was a little bit more chance to it. And actually, at Space Cowboy, Sebastian Pochon, designer of Jaipur, he did the river with Days of Wonder. He's done a lot of things. He was the one who just said, look, they should just be colors, and that'll kind of, and that was kind of the last thing that plopped into place that made everything work. So yeah, it is a really special game, and I really enjoy it. And it's also sort of one of my not disappointments, but that I think we designed a system that I think was really good, and we did do a lot of, and there is, I mean, it's not secret, we had designed a whole expansion which was a whole nother 8 families, and because of the way the game works, you could just, it's sort of one of those beautiful expansions where it's just, there's no more rules, it's just everything can slot in, and the fact that it never got made was sort of probably one of the bigger disappointments of my sort of designing career. Yeah, I'm glad that people, I mean, I'm surprised in a way that people still play it. I think the board game hobby seems to move so quickly. It's always nice to hear really nice things, like, as you said, that people still enjoy playing it, and that it still holds something for them, even though the game now is, getting on to being 5 years old. It's nice to see that people are still enjoying it.
It's very funny. If you will see my scenario for today, another line is one thing I really hate on this game, and what's really, every year I at least one day in a year I become totally angry that there is no expansion for this game. Well, it's one of my biggest disappointments, because this game, every time I play it, after the game I say, why such a beautiful game don't have expansion? Because this game really is designed to have another families of the gods in it. And in fact, my question which I had was, this game was published by Space Cowboys, which is owned by Asmodee, and my interpretation till now was that the game doesn't have so big market hit. It was selling well, but it wasn't hit, and it come in the years. It's 2015 when Asmodee cut they cut anything that which is not so great. They don't care about a game which doesn't sell thousands and thousands, which was good. I have good reviews. It really have good rating on Board Game Geek, but it doesn't sell thousands and thousands in Germany or whatever. Is it the reason why the expansion didn't come on?
I don't know. I think it's. I mean, I don't know the full story myself. Like, I don't. We weren't the ones who made the decision, but I think initially it was selling well, and it was nominated for the Kennerspiel des Jahres in Germany. And I don't think we ever thought that we would win. It's not really a German style game, but that definitely helped with some promotion, and they printed more copies for Germany, especially. I think part of it may have been, yes, that within the Asmodee family, yeah, you need to kind of, if you're not in the kind of 6 figures or 7 figures of sales, then you're sort of small fish in a way, and that I think also a more practical thing is that, you know, right, like Elysium kind of fell between Splendor, which obviously did very, very well for Space Cowboys and still, you know, had continued sales. And just not that long after it, they had Time Stories. And I think that probably around when Time Stories hit, and I mean, I know they had to do lots and lots of work for Time Stories leading up to that game. I think probably something changed in the way that Space Cowboys thought of themselves as a publishing company in terms of the styles of games they wanted to do. It wasn't that they didn't like Elysium. In fact, I know people in the company who really, it's one of their favorite games, and they put so much work into it. I mean, and you can see in the product they produced is incredible. But I think Space Cowboys changed to be a more sort of narrative story kind of driven company, and you see that in, you know, Unlock and Sherlock Holmes and it's, yeah. So I think those sort of combinations probably, and it just meant that, you know, it just wasn't quite enough, you know, and I think the decision was made higher up than the Space Cowboys, you know, team themselves, who were definitely, you know, interested and had asked us to make that expansion, which we had, and worked on it, and worked on it together. So I think I don't really have any. There's absolutely no ill will, and you know, where, you know, we still show games to Space Cowboys, and maybe we'll be working on games together in the future on various things. So it's nothing to do with that. I think that's just how things go, you know, and yes, I guess being part of a bigger company means that you don't get to make all the decisions yourself. Even the people who are on the kind of the direct line of the publisher working on the game, they don't get to even necessarily make the decisions. All of that being said, it's not completely over. There is still
chance.
There is still a chance. It's, I think, I mean, I know for example, Space Cowboys re-released Kalis recently. This classic kind of Euro game from Istari, which was a French publisher who was kind of brought in with
Sorry,
Space
I
Cowboys,
didn't catch the name.
Kalis.
Kalos. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so they published that. So I think they now this is just speculation on my part. It's nothing. I don't know anything from their side, but you know, it's getting back to the kind of more strategic games, you know, than what they'd been releasing. So Elysium could fit into that, of course. I know that they are the people. There is still a thread on Board Game Geek that I see every now and then. That'll be a new response. That I don't know how long the thread is, where people are trying to convince Space Cowboys to do an expansion. And I know they watch that thread, and I know they are surprised by, even now they're surprised by the number of people who do ask them about it. So I would say to the people who like the game, it actually does make a difference. They do notice that. They notice when people, you know, it's not like it's their corporate kind of thing and just don't hear anything. You know, they do.
They are still humans. They are still players.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's like, yeah, absolutely. And they love the product. It's not. So I think if there's a way that we can do it, we'll try and find a way. And we're still trying to do that. It's not there's no actual plan. It's not, you know, a thing, but it's something that it is still also important to myself and Brett. So, you know, yeah, it's not going to be soon, but it's not. We haven't given up, essentially. So, yeah, we'll see.
But for me, it's okay, because after we finish the recording, you have to promise me that you will send me this expansion. Otherwise, I'll clean all this interview, and you won't be famous in Czech Republic.
I know. I shouldn't have walked into that blackmail. Very cool. Yeah. Well done. Well played.
Okay. So that's really great to hear. That I really love this. In fact, I completely, from the joy that there is still hope for this game, I completely forgot what I wanted to ask next. Yeah, I know. Because one idea which come to my mind now is that what's about? Okay, two things. It's Tabletopia. Yeah. One possibility would be to at least to publish it in platform like Tabletopia. And have you think about it?
No, but I mean, I could definitely, it's something, especially right now, online games. Obviously, it could be a good way to get people interested in the game again. So it's a good point actually.
And second answer is I don't know the situation in Britain. How is your life as a board gamer now? Can you meet each other? Because in Czech it was, I think, at least till Sunday, it's almost forbidden to meet other people outside of your family. You can go only to the work, but it's forbidden in some sense to meet other people, sit by the table, play board games. So how is your board game life now?
Well, I got back to I mean, it was a bit of a scary time actually. I was in England, but I've been in the Czech Republic since the start of the lockdown because my partner told me they were closing the borders on the Friday night, and I was planning to come to the Czech Republic in a few weeks. And I actually was on my way to a gaming convention in the UK that was still running. This was in March, like middle of March or something, I guess. And I was sitting on the train, and I'd actually decided not to go to the convention after all because I was sort of I was like, I don't know if it's a really good idea to be around thousands of people with all this sort of happening, because in the UK it still hadn't, they were a bit behind in terms of reacting to things. And my girlfriend told me, and she said they're closing the borders on Friday night. You need to get, if you want to come in, you need to get in. So I quickly, while I was on the train going back to Cambridge, booked a fly Friday morning. I arrived in Prague 1 hour before I would have had to self-isolate mandatorily, and about 12 hours before they shut the borders altogether. And so so I've been in Prague for the full 6 weeks or whatever it's been, I guess, of the lockdown here in the Czech Republic. So I haven't seen anybody really. And in terms of gaming, I'm lucky that my girlfriend is quite happy to pretty much play any game. And
you are now in Prague or in Britain?
Yes, I'm in Prague. Yeah, I'm in Prague right
this
now.
I didn't know. I thought that you are in Britain.
I've been I'm in my apartment here in Prague. So I'm quite glad because all my board game collection is here, and so we're quite lucky that we have plenty of things to play. I've bought a lot of new games because if I'm not going to buy games now, then this is the best time of any time to you've got time to try new things. So we've been playing a lot of games. So for playing, it's been good, but for designing, it's been it's hard to play test. I wasn't ever really used to putting up prototypes on Tabletopia. I've just started this week actually, and I've worked with Brett on a few new games via Tabletopia, but it's not really the same. It takes a bit of time, and I think despite all of that, even without the question of testing, there's something about it's hard to be creative when you're kind of stuck in one place all the time, and you're sort of. For me, I always like going out and walking, and that was the way I would kind of think about things. And you can go out and walk. It's not completely forbidden, but it's not really the same. So I think, I haven't exactly been very productive in that way. But I've got plenty of other things to game design becomes like a bit of a job at some point because, it's just like project management. You have to do certain tasks, and like it's not just about making new games. Sometimes it's about various other things, and I've got plenty of that to do. So so it's not the best, but not the worst. I think we're pretty lucky here. I mean, I actually feel quite lucky to be in the Czech Republic, to be honest. And I had a nice little surprise. I arrived on that. It was a very kind of scary time because I didn't even know if they would let me in the country. I was a little bit worried that I'd get on a flight and they would just sort of go like, no, you can't come in, and that would have been horrible because we would have been stuck apart for however long. But then actually in the mailbox that I think Monday, my residency had been approved. So it was sort of this sort of surprising. So like now I have official residency in the Czech Republic and things. And so it was sort of a nice sort of movement of feelings. But I think they've handled it pretty well. It seems pretty calm. I'm not sure what it's like in Pilsen, but it's still fairly calm here. I talk to friends in the UK, and I think it's a lot harder there. I think in terms of how things are being managed. So anyway, it's not a podcast, a show about this, but
in fact, I wanted to ask also if you are playing online or just with your girlfriend at home.
I am playing a bit online, with just before I left England, I convinced my housemates to buy Wingspan, for example, because her fiance loves birds, even though he doesn't play a lot of games. And I said, well, this will be, and we'd play it and they love it. And now we play once a week on Tabletopia. And I play with my brothers who are still back in Australia. We play on Board Game Arena on a few things. I play playing some video games as well. Like we play Civilization, these sort of longer games that you never had time before, but now that's all we have. So it's so yeah, it's a nice way to and actually that side is it's weird. I think you have a voice chat going at the same time, and in a way, yeah, of course it's not the same, but it is a nice way to still catch up and still be chatting, but you've got something else to think about. So you're not just talking about what's it like or all these sort of problems. There is still a bit of a distraction, a bit of escape, and you get to play some fun games. I've actually got to I've got to try out new games on Tabletopia. I played Cartographers, which is this kind of like roll and write kind of game, which is really nice on Tabletopia, actually, how it is, and that was quite good. And yeah, so I've got to try some new things. So yeah, it's not too bad. I think the only thing is there's a little bit of fatigue in a way, because you sit in front of a computer. For my work, I do that a lot of the day. A lot of the time, the main way to entertain yourself in some ways is you watch a movie, or so that's also the computer. And if you're also then playing games on the computer as well, then it's just a little much sometimes. So I'm glad that I can mix that with playing in person with my girlfriend. So yeah, I'm happy with that.
When we talk about this about the publishing, for example, with Space Cowboy, and I saw you published with many different publishers, and really big publishers, in fact. Asmodee is one of them, or companies which belong to Asmodee group, but you also work with Days of Wonders in the days which I think when you published Relic Runners, they were still a lone company.
Yeah.
And in fact, Days of Wonders it belongs to my beginnings as the player, because I really love their former games like Shadow over Camelot, or Ticket to Ride is also great. And then you make for My Fair Games Costa Rica, for Cosmos, these adventure games. The question is, if you prepare the game, you design a game, and then you offer it to a publisher, or the vice versa. It's true that you obtain the offer or request, and you design the game on the request.
It's much more the first one generally. So generally, I or with someone else make a game, and then I try and think about who I could sell it to, and I've been going to Essen now, for about 10 years, and that would be the main, most Essens now, although this year will be different, but normally we'd have about 40 meetings with different publishers. And, I would take 5 to 10 new games and be showing them to mixtures of publishers. I try to get better in a way of making games, when I'm making games, to think about publishers more specifically a little bit now, because that sometimes helps, to guide decisions. And there are some publishers that I really, really want to work with. So I try and think about what projects might work for them, or how I might sort of make certain decisions that might help. But that's only very light thing. Yeah, I'm always driven just to make a game and then hope that I can sell it to somebody. There are a few small instances now where, you just get to know the publisher. I don't think it's because, sometimes people sort of say, like, is it different once you have a lot of games published? Do publishers sort of treat you differently, etc.? And I'm not sure if it's because, but it's just something you get to know people. You meet with them every year, and so they become kind of friends. And sometimes if something comes up, they'll go, "Oh, we have this particular opportunity, or we have this particular license, and we want you to work on it." So I've made, we're finishing one game which is kind of a video game license with a publisher. So that was on contract. That was that publisher coming and saying, "We have this license. Could you make a game for us?"
Which game
but
is?
I can't say, I'm afraid. It's a smaller. It's not a really big. It's not a very it's not like a huge AAA kind of video game. It's more sort of an indie game that a smaller publisher got the license for. But it's kind of cool, and it's been a new experience, because
Isn't
again,
it
that's quite
Firewatch because it's Australian?
Actually,
No, I'm joking.
actually,
I'm
no,
not pushing
it's
you.
interesting.
No, I'm joking.
No, it's fine. But it is. I could make a small clue. It is actually it is another Australian company, actually. Strangely enough, which was not a connection. It wasn't. That wasn't like. I mean, it was completely. It was funny how it worked out, I guess. But yeah. Anyway. But it's a very different way of working, basically. Like, and I think ultimately it's not how I like to work. I think. I'm thinking about becoming a full-time game designer or going full-time. I mean, I kind of have 2 full-time jobs right now, but and part of that is that, yeah, one way you do survive as a game designer is to have a lot of these kind of contract work. So, publishers will come to you and ask you to make a game because that's a bit more reliable in terms of income, in terms of, because if you make a game and you put all your time into it, but you can't sell it to anyone, well, then you just wasted a lot of your time. But it's not, I don't think I make my best games that way. I think I have to have the freedom to kind of follow the changes and the kind of where a game goes when I'm trying to design it. And if you have like a fixed point that you have to reach because it has to match this particular brief, or then you don't have that same sense of freedom. And it's not that I can't make games or that I can't make good games. It's just they're not the best games, I think. But we'll see. I mean, it's still something I'm kind of getting used to. And I'm sure just when you make your first games as a designer, they're always not as great as the games you make later. So I think I'll also probably get better at this as well. And I think that's inevitably I will work on some projects. And I guess the other thing now is that it's somewhere in between, because, you have like the adventure games, for example, we'll be releasing new new scenarios every, however month. So you have the kind of experience then of, it's kind of like contract work, because they want you to make it the next one, and you have to fit into this kind of thing, but at the same time it's still your own game, so you've had a different kind of experience. So that's also some of the trend. We actually have a lot of I have a number of other kind of narrative games that will be published, and again, it's a sort of similar experience, that they're kind of driven by content in a way that's different to a lot of other board games. I was interested, I can't remember who said it, it was somewhere on Twitter, but they'd sort of said this comment about that the board game industry is sort of changing, especially with all the narrative games. It's changing from kind of a product to a content industry in a way. So it's not about products, but it's about producing new content for existing products, or I think you see companies, focusing on, and that could be with expansions as well. It's not just narrative games, but it's they're realizing the kind of strength of having like lines of products or a universe, or like our comic books also did it in a way, which is an interesting change, and I think that also changes the way designers work, possibly.
In fact, it's understandable, because it's more and more difficult for all sides of this business. Because on one side, there are a lot of new games every year. You can see it in SN every year. The change is in hundreds. That like 15 years ago, it was, I don't know, 300 new games per year, and now it's more than 1,000. And I think it's difficult for publishers to catch the attention. But it's also there is also another side. It's difficult to learn the rules, And for me, in fact, it's more easier to take the system like Elysium or any other game. And okay, I hate expansions which give you the same thing. Yeah. But if you have a system, like for me, it's Andor, for example. If you have a working system, quite simple rules, and you just put there 1 or 2 rules and flower the game with the new things, new experience, new story, or whatever, I think it's good for both sides. Yeah. So
absolutely. It's the hardest thing, that kind of familiarity, and you realize you build that kind of brand loyalty, or to the game loyalty. You know that you like the game. You know that you like the way the publisher treats it, so you have a better chance of liking the next thing, so you trust it a bit more, and you're willing to take a chance on it because you see that. And I think it's smart, and I think the smart publishers are realizing that, and there's no reason not to do that, I think, and it's good to work with publishers who like, I'm not a marketer, and I don't say I really like marketing, but you just realize that it is
I'm sorry.
doesn't-
No. I heard you are not marketer, but then the sound fall down. Sorry.
somebody from Asmodee is like,
yeah.
no, nothing yet. No. I think even as a designer, you realize how important that is, and that you can't completely be like an indie kind of person and like, oh, I don't care about marketing and blah blah blah. No, if nobody knows about the game, then nobody's going to play it, So, or if they don't know how to play, then nobody will play it or buy it. So, yeah, more and more, part of the reason I want to work with publishers is if a publisher makes an amazing product, if they have like a love for that and skills for that, that's very important to me, and also an idea of how to tell people about it, how to sell the game. It doesn't have to be the most corporate kind of idea, but you have to have a plan, basically. I think is the point. Yeah.
In fact, for me, it's interesting to talk with you because I wouldn't say I know a lot of authors because I don't like to test prototypes, but in fact, I know few of them, and a lot of people do that. They start to work on one game. I don't mean it's their first game, but I talk, for example, to Alexander Pfister or other people, and they work on one game, and when they finish the game, they start to work on something else. And it was surprising for me that you said just a few minutes ago that you work on many. You have a few projects with Brett you are working on, and so on. And in fact, it's quite interesting because if you want to be really designer who make money from it, you probably cannot work only on one project to make it, to polish it till the end and then try to sell it, but you have to work on different projects and have them in the different state of finishing, and if someone wants one of these, then you finish it. Is this the way how you work, or in fact the question is if you like this approach, or it is something.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't do it the way I do it if I didn't like it, or at least it's the way I don't know any other way, so that's how I do it. But I think my one problem is that I always am attracted to a new idea. If I haven't even finished something, I mean that's not a unique problem. I think all creative people have this problem of chasing some shiny YouTube. Yeah. But that being said, I think I think it's probably related also that I like various types of games. So I think there's something about bouncing from game to game. If you have a problem with one, you can go and work on something else, or you don't have to kind of like. I can't focus on just one thing and just try and perfect it, because if I get a problem, then that is just, I don't want to have to kind of keep like trying to push my head through this problem. I prefer to like just turn away from it, and then when I'm doing something else, something will come to me, and I'll go, oh, that's how I fix that problem, or that's how I move ahead. But I always try and finish a game to a state where I would think it's 80-85% finished. So it's completely playable. It's balanced. It's as much as it can be. Of course, you could always keep balancing, and there's always going to be more. And I strongly believe that publishers will always add something. They have to add that last 10%. That editing stage is really important. But I do try and finish it so that it's as close to possible, and then that's when I would show publishers. There are a few instances where I'll show a publisher a game where it's much more like a concept, but that's sometimes. Usually they're simpler games in that the concept kind of is the whole game. It works. It's just or for some reason, especially some narrative games, also it's sort of once you know the concept, that it's about creating great stories, but that's not something that's impossible either. And also you have to know the publishers. But I think for me that's how I like to work. And I think, if you want to be a full-time designer, that's necessary, because not just in terms of having lots of different projects, but, publishers, things get delayed, or they make different decisions, or they'll sign a game and then choose not to do it or release it back to you. That happens. So you kind of need to like diversify your risk kind of thing, so to speak. I mean, I don't think of it necessarily like in that business terms, but, it helps to have a lot of things coming out, or, because there's always such a long lead up time to all games. It takes 2 or years from even the point where you show the publisher the game, and no matter, not even counting the time you've worked on the game. So right now, if I looked on my list of things which are signed with publishers but have yet to release, it's sort of like, I think it's about 25 games actually. So it's sort of, it just, things take time, basically.
Do I understand right? You signed recently, you have 25 signed games?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't sign them necessarily recently. Some of them were signed quite a while ago, but yes, 25. It's about 25, which will be released in the next few years or something like that. I think something like that.
You're a pretty crazy guy,
Well, I mean, I'm a very fortunate guy. I also work with a lot of people, so I think it's also different. Like the people you mentioned, like Alexander Pfister, he makes his games generally by himself, not always, but generally. And I think that's different. Like, definitely, it takes me longer to finish the games where I'm designing them by myself. It's not just about that you have kind of double the time, but it's more than that. That you get a synergy.
Now sorry.
Sorry. No,
just few seconds. Rewind. A few seconds.
No, you get a synergy. Just more than just having 2 people working on a game, you also get to go faster. You solve problems more quickly. So I think that's also, the majority of my games are collaborations. So that also helps me make a lot of the games, which it wouldn't be possible, I think, if I was by myself. I think of someone like, one of my heroes and friends, I guess, is someone like Bruno Catala. I think he has the same approach. He designs lots of different games, lots of different styles of games, and still manages to do a lot by himself as well that I don't. But I think he influenced on me in terms of thinking about game designing as a profession. As how some of the things you have to kind of think about if you want to do it full time, and it's not about giving up creativity, but you just have to be realistic about how things work and how you have to, how you have to survive. I think I've learned a lot from him in that.
Okay. Now it seems to me, in fact, I understand how it works for you now, because you are a famous person, but famous designer. No, I'm pretty sure about it. But the obvious question is what you did to publish your first games. Because you say, okay, you are known, you can go to the booth of the publishers in Essen to present them their games, but how you started? Because most of the people, this is most difficult thing, how to publish the first game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a somewhat unusual first story in that so the game that would become Relic Runners, which was my first game, I entered it in a design competition in Spain and France called JOUOB.partner, and I think this was in 2012, I think. And it was one of the finalists in that competition, one of the top 10 games. Brett Gilbert actually had a game that was a finalist. We both traveled to Granollers near Barcelona for the final, and that was all nice. Neither of us won. And later that year at Essen, somebody from the competition actually took prototypes of the games and showed them to publishers without us even knowing, actually. They did this, and they didn't tell us they were going to do that. And I got an email maybe 2 or 3 weeks after Essen 2012 from Days of Wonder offering to publish the game. And I hadn't met them. I didn't even know they were seeing the game, and they had seen the game and they'd liked it. And, so it was completely by chance in a way. It was really by good fortune. I mean, you have to kind of, obviously I submitted to a competition, and that's why I say to a lot of people, if you're getting started, like submitting things to competitions, especially in Europe, there are a lot of really good design competitions, and in the States as well, and things on Board Game Geek. That's a really good way to sort of get noticed, or to get your games in front of the publishers. But but that being said, even though my first game, yes, was Relic Runners with Days of Wonder, and that was great, actually most publishers, I think they're actually pretty good about, still in this industry, meeting with people they don't know. I think there's something about, there are definitely some, not rules, but some like guidelines that it's good for you to follow if you want to try and meet with a publisher. there's something about, it's just about showing that publisher that you're serious, that you're not going to waste their time. And sometimes that's about, it's how you write the email, or how do you just respect their time, I guess. Like in all our jobs, we get random emails, people asking us for stuff, or, it's not that we're horrible people. It's just we can't deal with all the kind of things getting thrown at us. So it's about kind of being respectful. But I think people are pretty open, and I say that we meet with all these publishers in Essen, but I mean, there was a first time when I met them and I was a nobody. I had no games published because obviously, it took a year or something to publish Relic Runners, and we were meeting with publishers, and I didn't have any games released, and it was just, they were open enough to meet with you. And I think it's when you put a game on a table and you show them that, okay, even if the game isn't what they want, they see that at least you have a sense of, you understand what games they might want, and you're putting things that are of a particular quality on the table, that that they know that you're respecting their time and they can trust you to that you're not going to waste their time, basically. So yeah, my advice would be is just to not be put off. And I really don't think the industry is driven by big names. It's not. The only thing I think it helps with is that there's a bit of a better chance that a publisher will play. Like if I give a prototype to a publisher and they they think they might like it, there's probably a better chance that they will play it because they know that I make reasonable games. But that's it. It's not more likely that they will publish the game. It's not more likely that that they're not going to meet with you just because you're not a big name or because you don't have any other games. Every designer has started with having no games, and I think the industry is still open to that. And actually there are publishers who are really looking for new designers because there's something about, sometimes your first design's the most creative. You're driven by something you really love and you have to make this thing, and publishers want something new and full of passion. So yeah, I would just be professional, be respectful, and I think publishers respond to that.
In fact, one thing which is quite interesting in this business, in this industry, is that it's really different from the video games in some sense, yeah? Because for video games, if you are a team who already created some game, your next game will be probably better, because a big part of the video game is the technical quality. It needn't to be, sometimes it's idea, but the problem is that if you have really impressive idea for your first game, still it's difficult to for your first game to have money, to have people, to have resources to really make the game looks astonishing. And it's really different from the board games, because lot of first games of the people. There are examples of designers who created only one good game, and it was their first game. It was a great idea, and then they only repeat the same concept again and again. Yeah. But still, I think in some sense this is advantage, that you can still, as a nobody, as you said, attend the big publishers, and you have such a great chance that the game will be published.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you don't need huge teams of people to play a game, to make a board game. You can do it yourself, and I think that means, in a way, it's very hard to get published because so many people can do it. There's that sort of barrier. There are a lot of prototypes getting sent to publishers, and I think that's just because I'm saying that, yes, you definitely can approach publishers. That's not to say it's easy to get a game picked up, because, but at least I think people are happy to meet with you. And I think that all that being said, though, I think it gets harder and harder. More and more people, I think, are, trying to design games, which is great, but also the quality is really rising. If you think 10 or 15 years ago, the average quality of a game in Essen was much lower than what the average quality of a game. You think of games that don't do very well now or don't do well on Kickstarter, do you think, I remember I saw it, it was a game from, I'm forgetting his name now. This is not very good. He did the zoo game, Colorado, and I should just look at my says Schacht, Michael Schacht. Who's done Colorado, Zoo, Laredo, Hansa, China. These beautiful games. And I saw a game that was on Kickstarter and barely funded. And I'm sort of like, that's, the standard is so high now and it's so competitive. So I guess all to say is I think it's a great time to be a player because the standard of games is incredible and the kind of variety and the themes and but as a designer you just have to. You have a lot more chances to have a chance to be published, but it's harder to actually get published because there's so many people out there. But it's a very friendly industry still. I don't know what it's like in the video game industry, but I guess that's my other kind of overriding feeling why I really like being a designer is that despite, irregardless of games getting made or not or whatever, but the people are all generally very friendly on all accounts. There's sometimes I joke, and I don't know how true that there's not a lot of money in board games, not for the publisher, not for the reviewer, not for the designer. So there's no room for anyone to be a horrible person because there's not enough money on the line to be horrible. You have to. So everyone's very friendly. But it's just a really nice industry to be part of. So yeah, I feel fortunate.
Okay, so you touch the skin of Kickstarter. So let's touch the skin of Monumental. So before my questions and my various talk about this game, is there something you would like to just say about this game? What is this game for you? What was this? Anything? What do you think about this project?
Sure. I mean, in a way, it's actually probably the longest game. Yeah, certainly of any of my games that have been published, it was the longest in terms of creation and. So I think I first started drafting it about 7 years ago or something like that. For me, it's I really like. Again, it's a system I really like. And then it definitely sort of has transformed over the time. There was a time where it was only a card game, and then it sort of transformed a bit and. It was that time of meeting Funforge, and they had this vision for the game. They saw it could have this amazing table presence, and they wanted it to be sort of grand. And I think actually it's kind of incredible. Like I'm lucky enough, I do have a few of the production copies now. I don't have all of them. I don't have the miniatures, but the kind of the care again that they've put into the product and the kind of the art direction is incredible. And it's sort of this really great combination of I think me providing I think a good game and a publisher sort of pouring in all their talent and expertise, especially in things like product and art direction and things like that. And there's still a part of me that can't believe I've made a game that has this many miniatures. It's not really a style of game I really make much of, or nor do I buy. So to think that one of my games is sort of one of these, many, hundreds of miniatures games is funny in a way, but it kind of befits the experience. And I think it adds to the kind of overall feel of the game, even if, as you said, I think earlier, like the miniatures maybe aren't strictly necessary, and they're not. There's something about just adding that kind of world that you can kind of feel that you're part of. And it definitely is interesting as I keep working on the game. It does provide inspiration as to where to keep going with it. And all that being said, it was also probably one of the most stressful kind of game release experiences because it didn't fund. It failed on its first Kickstarter attempt, and even through all the, through the second campaign, which thankfully was successful, but through that was very, it was very nerve-wracking time. It's not the first time I've been on Kickstarter. I've had Chocolate Factory was on Kickstarter, and no, that was the only one. Oh, there was another smaller one with Ludi Creations called Diesel Demolition Derby, but that was a very small Kickstarter. So, but this was definitely that first time in that kind of, the style that we associate with Kickstarter these days, these big games and the kind of expectations that come with that and the communities that come with that. So yeah, it was stressful a bit, and it was certainly stressful until it could get delivered. Thank goodness. I mean, you have bad luck along the way sometimes with manufacturing. And by whatever luck, thankfully, most people, not everyone, but most people have received their copies before all of this sort of COVID-19 stuff happened, which I'm really, really grateful for, because I mean, I think it's at least has given the game a chance, because I think had it, been stuck in shipping and I really feel I'm sure there are a lot of creators who are really struggling with that right now, is that, that their games are held up and that's really, really difficult. So yeah, it's it's a game I really enjoy, and it has certainly a huge mix of emotions just simply by the range of experiences that has gone through in terms of like the making of it, which I think is probably the most involved of any game I've ever had in a way. And that I personally have put a lot of work in terms of development and you know,
Yeah, sorry, no, it's a
editing
little bit stuck in.
and product.
A little bit.
Oh, that's fine. It just I said that, you know, it's one of the things I probably put the most effort in terms of
Yeah,
making
yeah.
a game.
Okay, so I was till now very nice about you and saying you are creating
Yes.
nice game and so on. So now it would be a little bit mean, you know. In fact, I don't own the Monumental. I just read about it, and you don't have to be so much scary. But I would like to know your opinion, maybe honest opinion, if you can. I've you know how to say, I really like if the game looks great. For example, Elysium is the game I appreciate not only because how it works, but I really love that it's look great on the table. The illustrations are just marvelous, and any component is nice. It's nice, you know. If you put it on the table, everyone like it, and there is nothing you don't use. And the point is, there is nothing you don't use. The game, I think the value of the box is exactly what you need for the game, what you play, it's just, for me, it's just perfect, you know. You like it from the very beginning you open the box, and you like it even after. Some games, like German games, typical example for me is Costa Rica. You know, it's your game, and I think it has very poor production value because I don't like how the game looks like. I like the game. I think the game is really nice. I played it a few times. I played it with the players. I played it, but it worked better with the non-players, who with the players, but just with family players, you know. But the game looks, if I should be honest, it's rather awful, you know. And so I think it's not about you, you know. I'm just giving the example with the games, you know. But then there is an opposite side. In some sense, it's, for me, it's Monumental, and I'm not buying very often these games on the Kickstarter. And sometimes I feel that it's recent days, a lot of games just putting inside of miniatures just attract the attention, but the miniatures aren't real part of the game. In some sense, I have the similar feeling from the Monumental, you know, because the crucial part of the game is the card game, yeah, as I think. And but I don't know this. But let's talk about it more generally. What do you think about the situation now? Don't you think that that recent days are, sometimes the designers put there the things just to make the thing nicer, to sell it, even though that it is not part of the system or the game or the design?
I think that's I think that's absolutely true. I mean, you know, I think you look at any of, you know, I hugely respect Eric Lang, for example, and Simon, and you look at the kind of, you know, crazy miniature things they put in that, and I think there's a few points. I think the first thing is that there are different audiences that products have to try and hit, and I think there is definitely. I'm not in this audience. I don't own a lot of miniatures games. It's not my thing. I don't paint. It's not, and I would agree that I would be perfectly happy generally with, you know, cubes and counters, even if, yes, it is also nice if something looks nice, you know, but I also have certainly come to recognize, and through this experience, know that there is there is an audience that, for them, that is important, even if it's not integral to the gameplay. For those players in that audience, it adds a lot to the experience of playing the game. And I think for Monumental, at least, what we tried to do was to offer two versions. One with miniatures, one without. So if you don't, if you're not as important, you can have a cheaper game without the miniatures, and it still looks nice. I think I would say that it still is a lot of effort was put in terms of things like artwork and components, not just the miniatures. There've been a lot of care. I think, I'm not sure, Funforge, that is one thing I think that they're very good at generally is just making, well put together games. But anyway, despite that, we tried to offer something for different styles of player, different audiences, and I think that's one thing. The other thing
but
is,
how it is from the point of design, because this is what I,
sure.
Did you feel that you was under pressure to put the things in fact you wouldn't put in the game, or there are some parts which are not how to say, I don't know the words, that it's really work together, I don't know, I'm just asking,
Yeah. No, it's a perfectly fine question. And yeah, this game has gone through a long sort of history of and yeah, there was no map, when the game sort of started. But I mean, that's why I said I put a lot of work into it, because I think once, from the point where I sold to Funforge, we worked for another 2 years basically on the game, and it changed a lot. Not completely. It's still, it's recognizable, but and that is because to me that is important, that you have to feel that every element of the game is integrated, that makes sense, that they talk to each other, that they combine with each other, and that was one of the reasons why it was so much work, because I wasn't happy to just put something, sort of bolted on and just sort of say, okay, that's fine. I still was concerned and trying to work on it, and I'm really happy with what we ended up with. Actually, I think it's probably the game of all my games that I'll always want to keep working on, and that I'll never feel. I mean, I don't think with any game you ever feel it's really finished. I mean, I think with Elysium even I feel like that way. I think with Monumental it's almost the most. I think it's partially to do with the bigger the scale of a game is, the more you have more levers to pull, you have more knobs to turn. It's harder to, and you have that big system combined with a card game, which itself has all the variability and all the combos and all. So, it's to say that I will always want to keep working on is not to say I'm not happy with the game. It's just, you'll always want to think that you can keep improving and keep doing it better. So I think from a design point of view, yes, it was important to me to make sure that it wasn't this thing that's added on. All that being said, I certainly take the point that I think a difficulty now, and it's related to this point about there being lots of games, is that, Kickstarter is, it's changed the way that people sort of promote games. It's also kind of changed what is important about a game. Like it or, I'm not sure whether it's something to like or not like. It's just a fact that how a game plays isn't as important anymore to sell it, for it to do well on Kickstarter. It's about how does someone perceive the game? How do they think it plays? And that's all informed by what they can see, not by reading rules necessarily. I'm not saying that people don't read rules. I'm just saying that you can see how people arrange information on a Kickstarter page. That's telling you what is the important things now.
I completely understand.
Yeah, and I think that's changing. It is subtly changing how you design, and how you have to think about. You can still have a great game, but you have to have a hook. I mean, you kind of did have to always have a hook anyway. It used to be mechanical. You could if you had a Stefan Feld game, Stefan Feld, I love his games a lot, and you would sort of think about those old Elysia games. They did have a hook of some sort, like Macau had the Windrose and things, and they always had this kind of. But I don't think you could sell a game like that anymore, unless you were already Stefan Feld and had an audience. That's not how games are sold anymore. So it's just changed kind of what's important, what publishers are looking for, and that's reflected in what's being published. And I think it is. I don't know if it's a pity, because I mean, at the end of the day, people are always buying games without exactly knowing how they play, because it's one of these things that. It's a tricky thing in the hobby, and it's hard for reviewers.
In fact, you cannot make bad game. You can make it once, but then the people won't trust you. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, it sounds that I don't want that you think that I was trying to force you to say that Monumental is good or bad. It was rather general question. I think there are, for me, the example is Rising Sun, because I think this game is really, the marketing is based on the miniatures, but the game is really good. I really like this game. I like the both parts, you know. So I just wanted not to force you to anything, just to know your view as a designer, because, you know, very often you see just the opinions of the buyers. They see the product, they don't care about how it works, they just buy the illustration, they just see it and so, oh, it's fucking beautiful, I will pay $100, don't think about it. And then they receive the product and they are just saying, it's not what I was expecting, but what they was expecting, you know. And then you see the marketing of the company, but not very often can hear the point of designer who is in between these two, because you cannot destroy your reputation by one game only because FunForge want you to make the game which doesn't work and just look great.
No. I mean, and it's not like that. I guess my honest thing, and it is being between that. I mean, I've been, like, personally, I back some games on Kickstarter, and I go through exactly the same thing that, I mean, now, to be honest, I kind of don't get anything on Kickstarter, not because I don't think the games are good, but just because, you know, there are so many games to play, and I realize I may as well wait to see what people think, or to see how the game turns out, you know, that I want to find. I think that my personal view of it is, I think it's actually quite, I feel for the publishers. I think there are definitely publishers who sometimes do act in bad faith, but I think it's really tough. There is a certain expectation from players that, I guess it's just there's I don't know how to put it. Like, I talked about how nice the industry is, you know, to work in it, and I think, unfortunately, Kickstarter kind of has brought out, I think, some of the worst parts of the industry. Definitely on terms of, you know, companies trying to make quick money by bad games, but also on the other side of just people just not acting very. I mean, it sounds really naive and simplistic, but it's just, there's sometimes a bit of a lack of, like, civility or just basic kind of kindness, you know, because I suppose the thing I would stand up for is the poor people, like, who work at these companies, who have to run the campaigns, who are not necessarily the people making all these decisions about, you know, what this looks like, or why did you work on this, but they're the people who have to, really, it's abuse. They have to kind of, like, sit there and take, you know, and it's not, I'm not saying it's the majority of people, but I know the person who works at FunForge really well. She's the community manager. She's an amazing person, and I've seen what, you know, these campaigns do to people, you know, who have to kind of work on. And I don't know how I feel about whether, there are definitely projects that are, like, bad and shouldn't fund, because there are certainly good games that don't get funded or Kickstarter that should get made, because I see, you know, you can see the kind of the game, or you guess what the game's going to be like, but for whatever reason it doesn't catch the attention of people. But I think the thing I see from being on the inside of being in a campaign, and, you know, involved in a campaign, you know, and it's also like, I'm kind of lucky because I don't even get the abuse, you know, like there's not many people who will actually single out the designer, or you know, and I'm not saying nobody should be abusing anybody. I'm just saying, I think I would like, my one plea to everybody in the thing would just be, it's fine if you don't like something or you don't want to back it, and that's perfectly fine. And I'm the same. I will look at something and go, oh, that's just ridiculous, or like, why, you know, you haven't even told me gameplays, you know, I click off. But at the same time, why I don't feel the same need to then go and rubbish the company or designer, or to it's just, there's just a basic understanding. And I think that's my only thing I think the most strongly about, is that it brings out sometimes the best, because you get amazing people who do really want to support a product and they want to see it succeed. They feel invested in it, and that's fantastic. And that's like the very best of humanity in a way, because they're willing for you to succeed, even though it's not going to help them necessarily, you know, and that's like really lovely. And then on the other side, you also see people who kind of want to see the world burn, and it's just people have to remember they're talking to real people at the end of the day. Like, it's all happening on the internet, and it's different when you're sitting. When you sit down at a game table, you can't be an idiot. Like, otherwise people don't want to play with you anymore, But on Kickstarter we can be like, and I always think about like that for me was also a big change when I stopped playing Magic and I really got more into board games. Is the community is so much more friendly generally. Like, the Magic community can be quite competitive and not very nice. And I always thought board games, and for the buy part, they are amazing. I think Kickstarter, and there are a lot of legitimate reasons, and and I've received a few Kickstarters that were disappointing, but I think ultimately the other thing is we've also bought a bunch of games. I've bought games that are published not on Kickstarter that are also disappointing. I don't know. It's just, I think with enough experience, I just see it's just another way that people are making games, and it's you'd be lying to think that people aren't. Even if you're not putting a game on Kickstarter, as a designer, you have to think about how you're going to sell your game. So, like, I never make a game thinking it's going to be on Kickstarter or not, but you have to think about how you're going to sell it. And Kickstarter needs certain things. Being in retail requires certain things, that you need to kind of attract people's attention. So, from the design point, you do have to kind of think about that. And it also makes you want to work with the companies who know how to handle all of that, because Kickstarter in the end, it's just a tool. It's another tool. And some companies, for however they manage it, they've worked out how to use it and use it well. And they have customers who trust them and keep coming back. And I'd say well done to the companies. They've managed to, they have players who are happy and that, they're getting their games and they've been able to fund them. So I don't know. I don't think I have like, it's a good question. And I don't know if I have like very like set feelings about it. So that's why my answer has sort of gone all around the place, but it's definitely an important question.
It's really a big theme. It's not a question. It's really huge. In fact, it came to my mind, there is one thing I don't want to finish in some sense with that because it's really huge. And maybe we can meet at least one more time, maybe in person, because we plan to make interview in person.
Yes.
And in fact, I would be happy if we talk about this, about Kickstarter, and also about the second thing, which I think we needn't to talk about today, but next time, that you are meeting the authors in Prague. This is the way how we get into the contact. You work, you help younger or newer designers. But let's keep it for next time, because it's the Kickstarter is a little bit even sad for me. I have also very strange feeling now. So I don't want to finish this nice interview or discussion with this theme. And the second is a little bit big for today. So in fact, I would like to ask you what game you are really hard working now about. Is there any game you can present? I know you said you are working, for example, about this game. You cannot license game. You cannot talk about. But what about something you really like or something new? Or
I'm unfortunately I can't talk about a lot of things. There is going to be, we just didn't want to talk about it, but there's going to be another Kickstarter for the next Monumental expansion, which will be.
You are breaking my try to get out of Kickstarter.
No, I'll just mention it. But in terms of other games that have been announced, I don't think anything has really been announced. There will be more adventure games, for example, that we're working on quite a bit at the moment. I wish I could really talk about actual games. Tony Boydell and I are working on some games. So the designer of Snowdonia, some sort of some more card-based games. Really like. I haven't finished a game, but I'm making a game all about flavor, actually. So it's a little a combination of my real work, but I was really like Wingspan in a way has had a big influence on me. I think in the last year, I think because it's it's roughly again in the style of game that I like. It's not a perfect game for me. There are things that, but the fact that I think seeing how people react to that and how it's kind of changed maybe to get people to play a game like that who wouldn't have played it otherwise, and it sort of made me think about how do you better combine theme and mechanism, and how do you put them together in an interesting way that's intuitive and surprising and interesting.
Very clean game.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very interested in the science behind flavor, and so I'm thinking about having a game with. I'm working a lot on a game about combining different foods, but that actually in the game the mechanisms are reflected by how food combines. Why does chocolate go well with bacon? Why does that happen? And this sort of thing, which I find really, really fascinating. But I think it's also something, at least it's somewhat, a lot of people can relate to it. Not exactly, but they can understand. Everyone's tried something, some combination of food and don't know, like it tastes amazing together, but it seems so surprising. It's something that's relatable to people about food, and so I'm really enjoying working on that. I'm working on an app, actually, a new app game. I'm not sure if you know. So there's a German creator called Tiny Touch Tales, and it's a game. He's made several games called Card Crawl, Card Thief.
Card Thief, I know. This I played.
Yeah. So
it's that you are going with your thief from the bottom to above and trying to steal. It's combination game.
Yes, and they're like different cards basically.
Yeah. It's quite interesting.
Yeah,
I don't play a lot on the phone, so I played only a few rounds, but it has nice graphics and the idea was very nice.
Yeah, I really love his work. His name is Arnold Rowers, and I actually just kind of reached out to him via Twitter, just kind of like we didn't know each other, and I just said, I kind of loved your games. He kind of tweets about ideas he's having for games, and I just sort of said, oh, that thing you said about this game, I've got a bit of an idea, maybe it could go with that. And actually we've been working together, and nothing certain but it's looking pretty good at the moment that it might have it happen. And for me, I think I'm really interested in, because I think he has really interesting rule sets, and he's not a board game designer, but he makes very board game like games. And I think it's really interesting because he pushes because he's not a board game designer, he doesn't kind of stick to like what the rules of board game design. You see a lot of board games get put into apps or made into electronic versions, but they don't necessarily fully embrace what can be done digitally. There's Hearthstone is very different to Magic, for example, and I think, like, love it or hate it, Hearthstone, they realized what can you do with a digital thing that you can't do in a physical game. So I'm very interested in that, and I'm really happy in how that's going. Apart from that, I will shout out, if I don't think it's available in the Czech Republic, maybe, but there's a game called Circle the Wagons. This isn't my game. It's a game by Buttonshy. I'd really recommend you or your listeners check it out at least. So Buttonshy was sort of another one of these minimalist companies. They make games in wallets. So I'm not sure if you like these, like you'd have business cards and you'd put them in these small, like, little plastic sleeves that you carry in your pocket. So they'd make games that are only 18 cards or less that could fit in one of these little wallets. And Circle the Wagons, I think, is probably their best known game, and I got the game actually recently, and we've played it like 20 times. It's a reasonably short game, but it's one of these amazing, from just 18 cards, all these combinations and complexity is really amazing actually. So I'd recommend check that game out, because I don't think it's probably been heard of much in the Czech Republic. You could order it. And if you're interested, I got it from like Amazon.de, fairly cheaply to here. So I don't, unfortunately. Yeah, other designers are much more, because I'm very maybe more cautious than I should be. Like unless a publisher says or that it's been like released publicly, I don't tend to talk about things. I never know. I think most publishers wouldn't care actually, but I never know what to do about that. So. Anyway, but there will be, there would be more news, but I think with all the world being what it is, I think a lot of projects are getting pushed back and sort of,
let's spare something for next time. I hope it wouldn't be the last thing. And one,
exactly.
And last thing is, strange question, always strange questions from me. What about some dream? Do you have some dream in a board game area. I mean, it could be anything, the dream design or dream board game in your collection, or something you really would like to play on the table from anyone.
Well, I think, well, I don't know if it ever really would happen. I would love one day maybe to make a game with Tom Lehman, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So he made Race for the Galaxy, which is one of my favorite games. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting him once, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. But I just, like, for me, I've tried so many times to make a game like Race for the Galaxy or something, just something about the kind of, I'd love to make a game myself that has that elicits the same thing of me wanting to play it. Like, I've played Race like hundreds of times, more than probably any other game. And just that, what you can pack into like 20 minutes in terms of like the depth of interesting decisions, and that feeling of like that thrill that I don't really get with any other games. I'd love to make a game like that. I guess that's, I don't know if it's even possible, and maybe Race is that game, and it will never kind of be, well, it won't be replicated, but maybe that's like the dream is to make, I think, a game that that resembles the thing I love to play more than anything. I don't know if I have this experience that like some other designers say, I only make the games I love to play, and I certainly like playing the games I like to play, but I also like playing a bunch of other games as well. They're not my, I don't have to play my game. In fact, I often don't want to play my own games because it's hard to see, you see all the history but that would be a dream, is to have the game that, I actually really want to, that's the thing I want to play all the time, because I've somehow managed. Maybe it's not possible because by the very act of creating something, you're sort of like, there's something in your head that you can't enjoy it in the same way. But that, I guess that's a bit of a dream, maybe.
I'm really looking forward to meet you in person, because in fact I see that we share the common thing that I also used to play Magic and leave the community because it's acidity, and I was amazed by the card games which were packed as a one box, and not everyone in the table have to spare its money, and you fight with the money to each other, but you have one box and it's only you and the fun from the game. And I also know Race for the Galaxy, and I also love, for example, San Juan. For me it's one of the best card games because it's it's so simple, so pure, and you can play it hundreds of times, and it always surprise you. So, and these two games are very close together because they evolved from Puerto Rico. So
yeah, of course. No, I look forward. Well, it would be nice to just play a game together, I think, essentially.
So thank you very much. For me it was such a great to listen to you. It was really nice. I hope it is not the last time we talk together. I hope the people will enjoy it. And let's see when it comes, when the quarantine ends, let's meet together. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Alice. Yeah, thank you.
So, see you. Bye.
Yeah.